It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, July 15th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is really curious how this day one lineup is going to shape up for the Flyers.
I could wait.
Well, we're going to talk about it on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with the salty Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. That's where you will keep up to date on all of our episodes and Flyers news. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. On today's show, we're going to talk about a little bit of Flyers news in the coaching department as well as Dev Camp. We are going to talk about how the Flyers lines could look on opening day. And then we'll wrap up with our plan for the rest of the off season and a gritty thing of the week. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, you can catch us over on YouTube. So drop a like, subscribe over there as well. Russ, once again, we got news not from the Flyers, but elsewhere on a big piece of the puzzle. And that's that Elliotte Friedman saying that the Flyers are going to be hiring Rocky Thompson as an assistant coach. And he was most recently with the San Jose Sharks, but before that, coached the Chicago Wolves in the AHL, pretty successful in Chicago with the Wolves. And he did not coach in the NHL this past season. He had to part ways with the San Jose Sharks because he is not vaccinated. And that was just part of the rules for the NHL. So I think that we can talk about him as a coach and his reputation on that side of things. The vaccination issue will limit his ability to travel with the team to Canada, though.
Right. And they're going to play a fair amount of games there. Like that whole Western Canadian swing. That's difficult. Who's going to be the fill-in assistant for that? Like, I get it. If you like the coach, you take him, you don't worry about it. But there's just so many caveats with this team. It's like they can't get anything that's just clean. And it's like, I'm not going to hold that against him. I'm sure he's a fine coach. But again, based on the fact on what he was doing last year, based on the fact that Torts said he wanted a surefire power play guy to cure the power play, who's the power play guy?
Well, that's an interesting question because, we already had somebody hired to do the PK and the defensive side of things ostensibly. And while with the Sharks, Rocky Thompson ran the PK and the defense. Now, I did talk to somebody who covers the Sharks, and they said that while that was his role in San Jose as an assistant coach, that Rocky Thompson is super smart, really innovative, and he can do both. It was just that was the particular role he was
But
filling
he's
on the Sharks
unproven.
at that
But
team.
he's unproven at the NHL level for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I do think that's a giant question mark.
It's a big
And I
question
think
mark
it's
because the coach, that's not his forte. He's already great defensively. So now you have three defensive minds there, and then Rocky will do the other job because he's done it, but he's largely unproven in that. Like, you see the issue here. This is nothing against him. This is just you're hiring people now and you're sort of fitting them in the way you want them to. This is what Elaine Vigneault did. And we all were wondering, well, who's the power play guy in this one? And the power play was never good.
Yeah, I do think that's a point of concern. And if and when the Flyers officially announce this, it's absolutely a question that should be asked to Tortorella, to Chuck Fletcher, and to Rocky Thompson. Maybe
I'll
he
try and show up to
specifically,
that one too, to that press
maybe he
conference.
can address it.
So
I
Charlie's not alone. I want to make sure I show up and help him out. He shouldered the load yesterday.
He did. I do want to say that a friend of the show, Sarah Avampado, who was the host of Locked On LA Kings, covers the Chicago Wolves as well. And she said that Rocky Thompson is one of those coaches players will run through walls for, and definitely got a team to come together to be greater than the sum of its parts. And if any team needs to be greater than the sum of its parts, it is the Philadelphia Flyers.
No question. And we appreciate that input from her because she's really good.
Yes, and again, she was in it day to day with the
Right.
Wolves while he was the head coach there. So that is great insight to have as well. We also heard from Nick Delorier as he was given his introductory press conference, and it was a little dicey just because I think the Zoom technology was off. But he seems to be excited to be here, and he knows he's not a goal scorer, so that's good, I guess. But he seems to think that he'll be able to get some PK time. I think essentially he's taking on the Nate Thompson role.
I guess, but it could be greater than that. He could end up being a third liner on this team. Like the thing is, it's good that he said he's not a goal scorer, but people when he was signed were kind of like, well, he scored 10 goals before, but yeah, that was like 4 years ago with Montreal with a ton of opportunity. Now he probably will get more opportunity with the Flyers. And like I brought up on another show, would it shock you if like Torts puts him in the slot or near the net on the power play just to see if he could muscle in some goals? It wouldn't shock me because he tried to do that once upon a time with like Brian Boyle and other big guys. Most of the time it doesn't work though, because you still have to have the really good hands, the eye hand to be able to deflect it in. But that's not going to shock me. The only problem is I don't want to see him and Zach McEwen on the same line. There's no point of it.
There isn't, and we'll get to how that might play out when we talk about the lines in the next segment. But I do want to say that as far as your power play supposition there, I question it only because now, again, we don't know who's running the power play exactly, if it's Rocky Thompson or not. But I would think that having JVR as the net front guy on one of the two power plays, which is his role, and I don't see that changing, that the other power play would, in theory, have a different look and may not have that same structure. So I'm not sure it's like apples to apples with
Okay.
that.
The only caveat I'll give you is so when JVR does take that role, and let's say he's 0 for a couple of weeks, do you think he'll still be in that role?
Now, that is also a good question. And with Torts, the answer is likely no. But again,
Right.
we
But
don't
you're
know
right.
yet.
He'll start off in that role. I still have to wrap my head around the fact that he will still be on this team.
Yes. It is remarkable. I do want to talk about just a couple other small AHL things. And we did mention yesterday that they signed a few two-way deals, especially on the defensive side of things for flexibility moving up and down between the Phantoms and Flyers. And partially that was because Adam Clendenning and Logan Day are not returning. Adam Clendenning has also already signed with Rockford. And I think that's an important note. And I don't know much about these new guys and what their mentorship skills are, but both Clendenning and Day were great defensive partners for the young kids, learning the game for Wyatt Wiley, for Cam York. And I think that it's just really important to have those pairings in Lehigh Valley set in a way to help the prospect defenseman grow.
Right. Ultimately, that's the goal. I will say I don't blame Clendenning because you and I both saw with all the
Oh,
call-ups
of
and everything
course.
last year, he didn't get a sniff, and he should have. And he should
Yeah.
have. And so I don't blame these guys for doing that. I know Belpedio, once upon a time, he was a highly regarded prospect. He can skate. He does have offensive ability and a pretty good shot, and he takes way too many penalties. So that's the part where you have to worry
Hmm.
about that in the AHL because that's the perfect AHL guy is the guy who takes too many penalties, right? That's what they love to call penalties in the AHL.
They do. Just a brief look at Dev Camp. I think, obviously they took a day off and did PR stuff around
And
town.
then I took another day off, but I'm going to be there
Right.
for the 3-on-3. I
Excellent.
needed a break. I needed a break. I hope you understand that.
That is fair enough. It's been a very busy couple of weeks in the NHL. So I did want to talk about what Kara Mori had to say, who's been helping with Dev Camp on the coaching side of things. She is the head coach of the Princeton women's hockey team. And
Hmm.
I thought it was really interesting when she was asked about, how do you evaluate players and how do you work with them at these camps? And because this is her second year back, she's been able to see some of the players grow since last year. So that was good. And she mentioned specifically that Owen McLaughlin, which you had mentioned as well, had made
Thank you
some
for
progress.
noticing.
Yes. And that Ronnie Attard is just a sponge and wants to learn everything. So it was good to hear about those two players in particular. But she also noted the similarities between her players at Princeton and the Dev Camp prospects, and that they're essentially the same age and they're at the same level of
Hmm.
development in terms of hockey IQ. Sure,
Right.
like the skills may be a little different or the strength is different in the men's game and the women's game, but ultimately they're in very similar places in their hockey mental game. And so it was
Yeah.
like really easy for her to work with the prospects.
Yeah, and I've watched her in action. I watched her a lot the last time I was there, and I felt like she was doing a good job. I'm glad she mentioned Ty Murchison because we're probably the only show or anybody that mentioned that he was even doing well in camp. And sometimes I pick up on the minutia. I get it, but when the coaches sort of see the same things I do, it makes me feel good that there are things to see in camp, even though some people will say, camp or dev camp, other than interviews, and it's like I don't know. I always find things. I think she's doing a good job. I think she is the one set of outside eyes that they have, and that's
Yep.
good. And I wish they had more of that.
I do too. And yeah, I think she's been a great addition to the Dev Camp group. And I appreciate her insight into the players and into the process of teaching hockey, which is always interesting to take a look at. All right, we are going to look at a potential day one Flyers lineup as it
Oof.
currently stands. It's a little scary, but we're going to do it and it's going to be good, I promise. But first, we're going to hear about our friends at Bet Online.
I don't know if I'd bet on it's going to be good. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league review, and news, including Major League Baseball and all the info leading up to next year's NFL, NBA, and NHL seasons. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, tennis, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Okay, Russ, it's now suddenly October,
Welp.
and we have to ice a lineup for the
Whew.
Flyers game against the Devils. And we have an interesting batch of players to look at. And so, first on the forward side of things, I think your top line at this point, for me, given what I think I know about John Tortorella, is going to be Couturier centering JVR and Travis Konechny.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance of that. So, okay, it's not a great first line. That's all I can say.
It's not, but I think that's what we have to work with, and I
Mhm.
think ultimately the question will be on the right side of things, and to me, I think he'll put Konechny up there over Farabee if he's healthy, just because 'cause he'll wanna give somebody with more experience those top line minutes.
Yeah, I could see that. And then again, we'll see how JVR plays away from the puck because he
Mhm,
started to do a little better defensively a couple years ago. Well, now he's really going to have to focus on it.
exactly. Line 2 is Kevin Hayes centering Scott Lawton and Cam Atkinson.
Like, this is their best line.
It is. It is,
Overall,
but
it's no slight to Couturier. This is their best line, though, as far as balanced and what you could have out there.
I agree. And I at least the one good thing about all of this is I really think it puts Scott Lawton squarely on the wing instead of center. And I think that makes the most sense for him and his game and what he can do for the Flyers.
Yeah, and he's going to lose some battles being a second line guy instead of a third line guy, but he'll give you the effort. Torts will like it. This will be Torts' favorite line.
I think so too. And now here's where it gets a little dicey. So
A lot
I
dicey.
a lot dicey. So I think the third line is Morgan Frost centering Noah Cates and then Joel Farabee if he's healthy, but Owen Tippett if he's not.
Yeah, I think you have it right there. Uh, I do think that Farabee, oh, he's not going to start the season. I think that's pretty obvious. So, and even Chuck said that. So based on that, I think that's what you have to work with here. Now, this will be a line where, again, Cates is a pretty good playmaker, and Frost
Mhm.
definitely is a terrific passer. It is going to be incumbent upon Owen Tippett to bury the puck. If he can, it will be a very successful line. If he can't, then somebody's going to have to pick up the rebounds on this line, and it's probably not going to be Frost. So maybe that's where Cates is going to come in handy because he is kind of tricky around the net. Again, like I said to some writers at Dev Camp, I hope Tippett has worked with somebody this summer because a couple of different writers agreed with me, and when we're replaying goals in our mind, when he didn't think about it, if you got the puck to him and he just
Oh,
shot
his
his
shots
shot,
were much better.
it goes in most of the time. But if he
Mhm.
thinks about it, then you've got a mixed bag. So, let's just hope that that's something that gets corrected. If it does, it's not a bad line.
I don't think so either. And I think in the kind of minutes that line will get, they'll be in the best position to succeed. I don't know that they'll be as good as the second line in terms of actual production, but I do think that they'll be in a good spot to really take a step forward developmentally on an individual basis. And to be in it together would be
Yeah.
good for them.
Where they're going to get hurt is when they play a team like Pittsburgh or a team that's really strong down the middle. It's going to be
Hmm.
up to Kevin Hayes to win those battles. Couturier will win a lot of them, but you can't play Couturier, 20 minutes every night. So that's where Kevin Hayes really has to step up. And if he doesn't, I got to tell you, I don't know if Kevin Hayes will be the second line center all year. Like, that's something where Torts doesn't care how much you make.
Right, and I do think Morgan Frost has an advantage that his faceoffs are excellent, and
Yes.
so that could also be a thing that moves him up the lineup as
Hmm.
well as the season progresses. Now the fourth line is a complete
Oof.
and total bomb for me, but I think that obviously Brown is going to center it. I think there's not really a question there. I think that Tippett might get pushed down there when Farabee comes back, but there's going to be a competition here. And this is a different competition than Chuck Fletcher thinks is going to happen. But if Delorier and Brown are guaranteed on that fourth line, let's say, you're right. I don't think Zach McEwen is the right person to complement those two. And that's where a healthy Wade Allison could maybe pop
Hmm.
in there, or if Isaac Radcliffe out of nowhere takes an incredible step forward, I
Even
think
if he doesn't
that's
take an incredible step, Torts might do it just because of his size.
yeah, and I think that's you need a more dynamic player to complement
Hmm.
those other two, and so I think that's the right strategy, which is why I think Owen Tippett there works again when Joel Farabee is back in the lineup, but I think that it could get really dangerous if it's Delorier, Brown, McEwen.
Yeah, the problem here is if Delorier is one of your penalty killers, he can't be fighting every game. You have to let
No.
McEwen do that because if all of a sudden you lose one of your better guys on the penalty kill, you're really affecting a lot in the game. That's what you have to think about here.
Yeah, I think it's a huge question, but again, on a team like this, if you're being ticky tack about the fourth line, I don't know if there's much worth in doing that, but at the same time, you want to make sure that players are being put in positions to succeed as best as possible.
Right.
And that just shows like how the lineup is being constructed and it reflects on your coaching overall.
And this fourth line will play more than most fourth lines because it's Torts.
Exactly. Exactly. Do you have any idea about any other potential extra in there, or do you think a healthy Wade Allison is the right option?
I mean, a healthy weight Allison's like an oxymoron. I'll believe it when I see it. But I do think he's an option. I do think Ratcliffe's an option. And I guess you could always throw Forster in there too.
Yeah.
That's
All
it.
right. To be determined. On the defensive side of things, obviously, Chuck Fletcher seems to think that the top four is a lock with Provorov and Tony DeAngelo as the top pairing and Sanheim and Ristolainen as the second pairing. But
So if I was going to
uh,
go 1 to 32, right, on the
mhm,
basis of their top four, where do they fall in the league? Somewhere between 20 and 32.
exactly. I would say maybe 25 and 32, if
Yeah.
I had to be honest.
Yeah. Because, I mean, look, if Torts gets D'Angelo to play a little better, he's still not a number two. He's never going to be a top four guy, but he skates like one, and he he can bring the puck up like one. So they're going to just force him into it. Like you said, Provorov is going to be covering for his life.
He absolutely is. That third pairing, I think, is likely York and Braun, but Sealer could sneak his way in there as well. Depending
Oh,
on Torts, I can see it.
uh, don't forget about Kevin Connaughton, who played for Torts. I think I think this third pairing is a Braun Connaughton, and York is going to have to prove it. And here's where I will differ with like the Flyers wanting to try and get their young players in there. So Cam York is definitely a top four defenseman in this league. Do you want him to play the third pairing all year? I don't. I
No.
would rather him be the number one guy in Lehigh, keep playing the power play. There's an injury, you put York into the top four. That's what you do. But if not, let him play more time in Lehigh because, again, I don't think on a bad team putting him on a third pairing where he's going to get benched for part of the game because they shorten the bench because that's what Torts does is going to really benefit him.
So here's the question I have for you then, based on that, which in theory I think makes sense. But given the current coaching situation as we know it in Lehigh Valley, relative to what Torts is doing, would you rather have York around Torts day to day and in that system playing third pairing minutes?
No, I Cam York is super coachable. Like he knows what to do. I don't think you can get him off track
Okay.
with the foundation he has. So in Lehigh, being the number one power play, the number one everything guy, is fine with me. Unless all of a sudden, he has a big role with the Flyers, like either in the top four or plays more than 10 minutes a game.
All right. I think that third pairing is going to be extremely competitive, but at a very low level. So
And
it's going to
Torts
be
will
a fascinating thing to
Yeah, and Torts
watch.
is gonna talk up Nick Seeler all camp. Nick Seeler will get into a few fights early because he knows that'll catch the coach's eye. And, if Braun gets injured, you're gonna see Connaughton there with Seeler at times. Then you're gonna see York come up and play a little bit. Like, it's gonna be a carousel a little bit.
Well, we know how much the NHL loves its carousels, whether it's coaching or players or GMs. It's a thing in the world of hockey. All right, we are going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and just talk about the rest of the off season and how that is shaping up next. Okay, Russ. So we have reached the end of the Flyers free agency time. We've had the draft, we've had development camp. Now we've got a little bit of time off or downtime before we get into rookie camp and training camp in, what is it, 6 or 8 weeks from now?
Yes. Look, I
So,
I think some of our coverage will be of the youngsters, some of them that
mhm.
they just drafted. and even some of them from the year before his draft, and kind of grade where they're at now, rather than hearing us bitch and moan about what the bigger club will be. I think we could focus on, what the future might be, because I always say, even if you hear me bitching about the big club, don't take it out on the kids. It's not their fault.
I'm sorry. Can you go back and like repeat that without saying bitch? Because I.
Oh, oh, you think it's going to get flagged? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think some of our content will be focused on prospects, because, at the end of the day, if you hear me complaining about the big club, I never take it out on the prospects. And that's something where I always tell people, listen, don't take it out on the kids. Always feel good about them, because that is your future. Support them. They need it. And that's why we'll talk about that rather than crazy scenarios for the big club.
I think it's really important, especially because we know that the management overall tried to go halfway between a rebuild and a retool, and it didn't work. But at the same time, you're right, we do have some good prospects in
Hmm.
the system to take a look at. So, want to focus on that and where this could help the team in the future. We want to talk about some of the existing players on the team and how they can take steps forward in a
Hmm.
year like this, because I think that's really important as well. And we do have a lot of questions going into next season that we're going
Oh,
to
sure.
ask and discuss, whether it's filling out the coaching staff on the Flyers level, figuring out, once again, we have very little to no information about the Phantoms and what they are going to look like going into next season and how the Flyers and Phantoms are going to work together. Very little info on that. And so that's something that we're going to want to fill in for the rest of the offseason. And, we're going to bring people in to talk about all of these things as well. So there'll be a lot of fun content for the rest of the summer. Really looking forward to bringing all of that to you. And of course, if there's anything that you out there are interested in us talking about, whether it's a particular player or a prospect, let us know. And we
Hmm.
are happy to bring that to you. Because again, I think there's so much detail that we can look at in this organization, even if confidence is low in the team for next season overall. I think there's a lot we can look at toward the future that is actually pretty good and fun to talk about. So,
Yeah, I always
really
focus on that.
happy really happy to do that. And on that note, just want to give you a programming heads up. Starting next week, we will be switching to a 3-day a week schedule for kind of the downtime for the rest of the off season. So we'll have shows most likely Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But if that changes any particular week, we'll give you a heads up and let you know on our Twitter account at Locked On Flyers. And you can always get in touch with us there as well. I do want to wrap up with one gritty thing of the week. And I am a huge, huge space nut. And
Hmm.
so was super into the new images from the James Webb telescope, and just absolutely beautiful pictures. And somebody out there photoshopped gritty into one of the pictures out there, and it is just hilarious and awesome, and it fits. And so just bringing two of my loves together into the end of our show for the week.
No, I like it. I sometimes I question the amount of money that we spend on these microscopes and these lenses, but you know what? These
Less
pictures,
than 1% of the federal budget is NASA,
I
Russ.
know, but this one was pretty spectacular. Even I could see the constellations, the various ones, like really easily, like not like,
Hmm.
a home telescope on the house on the roof where you have to sort of strain to see, oh, there's the Big Dipper and all that. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's always good to hear from some of the people that don't pay attention as much
Hmm.
to these things as I do. All right, that will do it for today's show and for the week. Like I said, tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com with any topics you want us to cover in the rest of the off season. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long, so you can stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL. Have a great weekend, everyone.